Hey everybody, what's up? This is G here, and today we are here with Solo Fighter yet again, and this is episode 15. We are going to be going over the MMA year in review for the year of 2017 before we start the fight year of 2018. We're going to be talking about the MMA events, MMA happenings, all that fun stuff that happened in 2018, and possibly some other controversial topics. As yet again, I'm G. I'm here, Solo Fighter, and I'm here with Cyrus. Cyrus?
What's up, everybody? And well, wish you all the best. And looking forward to a great 2018, full of MMA, full of success, full of happiness, what have you. Good evening, Roberto. Nice to see you again,
Hey,
man.
Roberto.
Happy New
Thanks
Year,
for joining
bro.
us. So we're going to start this off with UFC 208. This is a fight that was possibly the start of a pretty good year for the UFC. And I mean, how do you feel about that card there, Cyrus?
Well, I actually enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. What I didn't enjoy too much was the main event, in the sense that, Hall shafted.
No.
Shafted really pretty bad. But it was, it wasn't the greatest card ever, but I enjoyed it. Like I'm a hardcore MMA fan, so a card has to really suck for me to have a problem with it. But it was good. There was some great fights. Like Ronaldo Sosa was on there. He submitted Tim Boetsch. Glover Teixeira was great. Dustin Poirier versus Jim Miller was probably fight of the night. No, there was some good action. It wasn't, what graded on me. There's two things that I remembered. It was the New York, the NSAC ball sack, the New York Athletic Commission completely fucked up like multiple times. And I mean, they fucked up on two fights. They fucked up with being awarded a win that he didn't deserve versus Derek Brunson, and then the worst, the most egregious, was of course Jermaine the Randomy hitting Holly twice after the bell, but like so obviously, like there was no doubt that there was intent. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't, it was just out of frustration and just pettiness, and the referee not doing anything about it. It was just like, it was unbelievable. It was really bad. And Holly somehow losing a decision. And the other thing had nothing to do with the fighting, but was, UFC president Dana White going off and saying something just so petty and so pathetic, talking about the card and saying the best part of that whole event was the flight home, which is just, it's, I mean, anybody saying that's kind of shitty, but for the president of the UFC, fighters, guys, who are underpaid and are bleeding for our entertainment, was just pathetic. Like that, those are my main takeaways.
Okay, all right. Roberto, thank you for joining us. As I stated, do you have any takeaways from UFC 208? What do you feel about that card? Well, I guess Roberto's mic might not be working, so we'll just have to wait. But I will give my own personal opinion on how I feel about that card. I think that card, as a starting point for the UFC, wasn't terrible, considering how the main card was set up, and I think that there were some refereeing and judge errors made on that card, but the whole setup of that card was pretty cool. Jacare, fighting Tim Boetsch, Glover Teixeira, knockout artist, Dustin Poirier showing his skills, Anderson Silva, of course, taking on Derek Brunson, even though, yes, I also disagree with the decision that came out of that fight, and Jermaine Durandamy finding Holly Holm the way that she did. It was a highlight card that just had too many problems. From a conceptual theory of a UFC card being set up like that, I was thinking that it was going to be like a good, like straight fight card, but there was just too much controversy, just too much going on. And so it kind of put the damper down of a card that should have been at least an 8, a 6 on the 10 scale for me. So that's how I feel personally about UFC 208. So yeah, it was
well put.
Yeah, just too much controversy, and it just put a damper on it. So
yeah, just completely unnecessary as well. It wasn't like it was some freaky thing that happened where no one could do anything about. These were completely avoidable mistakes, and sadly, that's just the way things are in New York. They can't get their shit together. They won't. I don't know what their problem is. And it's like they bring their own referees into the mix who are just like so inept. It's almost laughable. So yeah.
So hopefully this new year, 2018, NSAC can finally pull it together, get some good referees, get some good judges, and just at least become better this year. Not become perfect, but become better. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Me personally, as an MMA fan, is looking forward to for the year of 2018. Newer.
Yeah. Take MMA seriously. Respect its fighters. That's all we ask. That's
exactly
all you got, and it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. You've got good referees out there. You've got good staff. Just you do the minimum research just from word of mouth. You can get good people. They don't have to be expensive either. So yeah, there you go. And I couldn't agree more with you, Gerald.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So the next card we're going to talk about is UFC 209. UFC 209, Woodley versus Thompson 2. Cyrus, how did you feel about that card for that whole event there?
Well, for starters, the biggest story, the biggest fight, and the biggest story about this card was very obviously a fight that wasn't on it. I mean, like anybody who loves MMA probably knows of the Diaz brothers and their famous area code 209, Stockton 209. And I mean, anybody with like half a brain, C209 should have belonged to the Diaz brothers. And it did. And it did for all the wrong reasons, in the sense that the UFC, Zuffa, Endeavor, WME, IMG, whatever the fuck you want to call them, just couldn't get their shit together and pay those two superstars, because that's what they are, what they're worth, what they deserve, what they've earned. They just wouldn't, they couldn't care. They couldn't care less. Preferred treating them like dogs, and they'd rather, like throw away money than make some money. So just out of sheer pettiness and ineptitude, again, we missed out on seeing Nate and Nick, or either of them, participate in the main event of UFC 209. That being said, UFC 209 again wasn't bad. It was pretty good. There were some good fights. The first fight that stuck out to me was a guy I'm really high on, even though he lost his last bout. Tyson Pedro, he knocked out highly rated prospect Paul Craig, Scottish, calls himself Bear Jew, which is a great nickname. Tyson Pedro from Australia knocked out Paul Craig with elbows. It was a brilliant performance. There was some very decent fight. Darren Elkins, that's one of the greatest fights you'll ever see. Come from behind. I mean, Darren Elkins, he's just, I mean, to me, he's one of the greatest examples of MMA, of why the sport is special, because this guy just leaves it all in the cage. And he just makes it just upsetting, beating the odds. And he fought a really highly rated blue chip. I mean, he's not even a prospect. He's like a future title challenger, Mirsad Bektic. And Mirsad Bektic is a high-level grappler, wrestler, extremely powerful, great athlete. And he put a beating on Darren Elkins for 2.5 rounds. Elkins took it like the man he is, And then when Mirsad slowed down, just put it on him and knocked him out with a head kick. It was just one of, I mean, I'm not even doing it justice. You guys have to see it to believe it. It's just one of the most amazing come from behind wins you'll ever see. One of the biggest upsets I've ever seen. That was in the prelims. That's what kind of stuck out to me. Marcin Tybura knocked out Luis Enrique. Marcin Tybura from Poland. I'm a big fan of his. Then you had Alistair Overeem knocking out Mark Hunt with a knee to the solar plexus. That was pretty good fight. But that came with an asterisk in the sense that Alistair, who has had issues with performance-enhancing drugs, was fighting Mark Hunt, who's currently taking the UFC, Dana White, and Brock Lesnar himself to court for that ridiculous UFC 200 whatever you want to say screw job they pulled on him, Alistair. And after Alistair won, Dana showed up at the press conference and went on a long rant about how great and brave Alistair Overeem was, because he still fought after he'd had like a food poisoning or an upset stomach, some nonsense, And I mean, anybody who follows MMA, who's followed MMA for more than like half a minute, knows that Dana loves nothing better than to dump on his own fighter. So for Dana to go on a rant about how great and brave Alistair Overeem was and insist, I found that really suspect. So I did some research, and I'm sure others did, because it didn't take me too long to find out that prior to the fight, Alistair Overeem had a special permission or dispensation, whatever, to use IV. To use an IV, which is really weaselly because IVs are banned in the UFC. So after the fact, I found that really suspect. And you had, again, it was a lot like UFC 208. Just it wasn't the best card, but it wasn't horrible. Like there were a couple fights that stood out. I mean, Cynthia Calvillo made her debut and submitted Amanda Bobby Cooper, and she's gone on to have a great year, and she's a top prospect now. But it was just, this one to me was much more of a bummer than 208, because 208 was a last minute card. It was put together like haphazardly. As opposed to this one. This one, they had plenty of time to get it ready. For months, they were talking about bringing the Diaz brothers. So, yeah, this one was a bit of a bummer. Just like the main event was a bummer in the sense that Tyron Woodley, too, like a lot of people were expecting it to be, pardon me, to be like, like really good, because the first fight was pretty good, but it ended up being really underwhelming because Tyron Woodley fights not to lose, and Stephen Thompson, I mean, he tried. The thing is, when one guy is almost refusing to fight, it's really hard to get anything started. And Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is more of a counter puncher.
Okay.
He's blameless for what was a really disappointing fight. But I mean, like, Tyron is the champion. He's supposed to be, after everything he said, like during the in the lead up to the fight, like he was going to knock him out. He was, all that stuff. It was, but I mean, both of them are to blame, I guess, because it takes two to tango. I mean, Stephen Thompson still outstruck him. So, Stephen Thompson wasn't quite as ineffective as Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley just like did what he does these days, is just stand up against the cage and just wait for an opening. And, when he has that opening, hit as hard as he can. I don't know. I have very mixed feelings about that fight. Just like the Tyron Woodley's next fight, it was extremely disappointing. And like, I guess Tyron did enough to eke out a decision, but you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm biased because Tyron Woodley as a fighter he just bores me to tears. But I thought that, you know, it should have been another draw because, like, Tyron Woodley did nothing until the 5th round when, you know, he dropped Thompson with an overhand right, but didn't do enough to finish the fight. So I don't know. I thought, you know, you could have easily given it another draw, and then, you know, like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson would have had another chance. Talking about, but that's just being, you know, that's just
okay.
But yeah, disappointing to
All
me.
right, well,
Pretty disappointing card. Disappointing main event.
Okay.
Anyways.
A lot of people might agree with you. I mean, a lot of people said that, you know, I think that's where Tyron Woodley got the nickname of TyQuil, as Kobe Covington, so, you know, named him endearingly. But my take on UFC 209 is it yet again. It's supposed to be kind of like a highlight card in between, you know, brawling heavyweights, potential prospects fighting on the card, and, you know, a championship fight. You know, they had Cavillo, they had Rashad Evans, you know, showing up in full force as he's supposed to. Lando Venata was supposed to come back and prove to everybody that, you know, that he could take on top contenders and do all this crazy stuff. And of course, you know, Alistair Overeem versus Mark Hunt, that was supposed to be just a brawl. And in terms of the fights happening, I'm going to have to say I still think that this card was possibly better than UFC 208 in terms of watching Lando Venata fight to actually see where he stood in terms of his actual skill and what happened between him, you know, and
David Tamer.
Yeah, pretty much. And then seeing Rashad Evans come back, just kind of see like, hey, you know, it's an older fighter coming back, you know, older generation fighter coming back. Let's see what he can do. So that was interesting in itself, considering most people already knew how Rashad Evans might have stacked up coming into the newer generation of fighters. And watching Cynthia Cavillo, you know, show her true prospect potential, you know, that was also interesting. And then you had the topped off with the Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Thompson fight. Just kind of like, hey, you know, Stephen Thompson knows what he's supposed to do now to beat Tyron Woodley, and Tyron Woodley knows now that he can take Stephen Thompson down. He can hit Stephen Thompson harder than Thompson can hit him. So they should have known each other's weaknesses by now and doubled down on those skills that they needed to win the fight. So that was what was getting people to come back and watch that fight again, considering what happened the first fight. So I think that it was a lot of anticipation for that fight, coming from myself at least. It was just a little bit better than UFC 208 in terms of anticipation and also watching it as well. So that's how I felt about UFC 209, and then that maybe other people felt that way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, but I can't disagree with anything you said. I mean, like, it was a bummer of a card for me because of the main event, but also I didn't agree with the decision for Lando Venata. I thought he did enough to win a split decision. Like, I disagreed with that. Like, he took a loss, but I thought he shouldn't have. But that's just me. Then again, you know, I'm a huge Lando Venata fan. So, like, I didn't think David Tamer did enough to win. I thought Lando took that decision, even though, like, you know, Lando ate some big knees and shit. I thought he was more active of the two, but whatever, you know, like, that's just me.
Okay, understandable. So I guess we're going to go to the next card this card is a little bit shorter in terms of like highlight for the year of 2017, but UFC Fight Night, Gastelum versus Buffalo.
Oh yeah, that was
yeah.
It's the main event. I remember of that one. It's fucking Gastelum knocking Belfort out cold, and announcing himself as a real contender for middleweight.
Yeah.
Even though I still believe his future is at welterweight, and he's a future welterweight champion. And if he ever faced pretty much anyone at welterweight, he'd have a good chance of winning. Like, he could be the next great welterweight.
Yes, he
but
could.
Yeah, like he's doing some great work at middleweight. And boy, that night, man, he was that was one heck of a performance. He just ran through the Phenom.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like,
and it was also,
you
know, the fight card that had Mauricio Shogun Hua on it as well.
Exactly. So, it was a good it was a decent card.
Yes, bringing back Shogun into the mix and everything, and seeing that head kick, you know, I was just like, yes, you know, older fighters are starting to come back, and you know, it's like they have a chance. It's just that kind of bring out that nostalgia, and just a nostalgia of an older generation MMA fan. That's why I just have to toss this quick highlight in.
Yeah, you know, it's like they say, form is temporary, class is permanent, and Shogun has tons of class. I mean, he's done it for nearly 20 years now. He was a Pride superstar, won the belt, the UFC light heavyweight belt, and that he's one of the greatest ever. He's an amazing fighter. I mean, just like, you know, look at any of his Pride highlights. That guy was an animal, and you know, still is a class act. You know, so you know, he's gotten older, but he's still an amazing fighter. So yeah, absolutely, one of the greatest ever, and one of my favorite fighters to watch.
Right. So yeah, that's what's just like, you know, that was kind of like just a small little throwback for older generation MMA fans there. I just thought that was a weird card that a lot of people just overlooked in terms of like, oh, this isn't a main event highlight card or something. I'm just like, well, if you really look at it, it has Vitor Belfort and Mauricio Shogun Hua. Like, come on now.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, absolutely.
That's fine enough. So
great.
Now let's get to UFC 210 in Buffalo. What are your thoughts, Cyrus?
Oh, that was a good card. I enjoyed it very much. It was lots of good fights. Again, this was in New York, so New York wouldn't have been New York if it hadn't been for them fucking up again. They embarrassed a female fighter named Pearl Gonzalez, who is matched up against again Cynthia Calvillo or Calvillo.
It's Calvillo.
Yeah, exactly. And completely embarrassed her because they said something about how having implants should ban you from fighting, which was just unbelievably stupid. It was the whole sorry episode. But the fight card itself was really good. Like, there's some great fights. There was Kamaru Usman, who will be a future title challenger once the UFC brass get their heads out of their ass. He put a beating on Sean Strickland. You had Thiago Alves having a great performance versus Patrick Cote.
Yep.
Patrick Cote's final appearance of his career, of a long and storied career. You had, again, Cynthia Calvillo defeating Pearl Gonzalez in a great fight by submission, rear naked choke. You had Gegard Mousasi, again, the New York State Commission fucking up what really could have been fight of the night. Gegard Mousasi defeating Chris Weidman by TKO with knees to the head, which were at first illegal, then legal, then we're not sure. Then Chris Weidman's TKO'd because he can't tell you what day it is and where we are and whatever. It was an embarrassing performance by the commission. It's completely avoidable once again. And of course, you had the main event, light heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier defeating Anthony Johnson by submission, just like the first time they fought, but in one of the most strange and weird performances. I mean, it was very similar to the first one, just that Johnson, who's one of the most fearsome strikers, one of the biggest knockout artists ever, insisting on grappling Cormier, wrestling Cormier, which was really weird. And then it was almost like he was doing his best to lose the fight because his tactics were all upside down. His coaching staff, his head coach, his coaching staff were all telling him to stop wrestling. And he just kept on wrestling. He wasn't striking. Daniel Cormier, who's like one of the greatest wrestlers ever, wanted to strike. And the striker wanted to wrestle. Then when Cormier finally relented and started wrestling, he obviously, took over because, he's an Olympic class striker, wrestler, pardon me. And his arms in position around Johnson, around Rumble's throat, and Rumble couldn't tap quick enough. It was a really strange performance, and then a really strange night in the sense that Rumble Johnson, basically retired right in the cage right after that.
Yep.
Those were my biggest takeaways from that night.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say those pretty much were the same takeaways for me as well. I mean, I'm going to elaborate here on Kamaru Usman as
oh yeah.
Really, what is there to say? You watch the guy fight, and you cannot be anything but amazed at how good this guy is. Yeah. It's like I'm going to have to turn it down a little bit of a notch and say that he's not Khabib wrestling good, but his wrestling and his ground game is pretty damn good. And then also his striking, it's not
nasty.
It's not like some type form of like accurate like GSP or Anderson Silva like Cobra strikes. It's just nasty and brutal, and it comes out of nowhere.
And it's effective, and it's nasty in the sense that he can really put the hurt on you.
Right.
It's not as polished as some of the striking specialists, but it's effective because it'll knock you into next Monday. It's like he hits hard. And you know what? He wears that nickname perfectly. He's a nightmare. He's a nightmare for pretty much anybody.
Exactly.
I think there's plenty of middleweights that would have trouble with this guy. This guy is unbelievably strong. Inch of fat on him. He's a nasty, nasty fighter. And I can't wait to see him in a title fight or in a title eliminator, because that guy, he gives me the same kind of vibe as someone like Tony Ferguson.
I'm giving him the same kind of vibe as Khabib.
Yeah. No, same. Yeah, a mix of the two. Because it's in the sense that no matter who he faces, he's always confident that he can get to him, and he has this underlying nastiness in the cage where it's just like, he just wants to put the beating on people, but he's not a brawler. He's not a thug. Like, he's a really good wrestler, but whatever it takes, he will get to you. And, if he can get to your chin, he will. And he'll hit hard, and he'll hit as hard as he can. I mean, he's KO'd people, but he's also a good grappler.
Yep.
I mean, excellent grappler. He'll submit you. He's
very technical.
Like,
he's strong.
And he is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
and
that was definitely a highlight there for that card. I just had to elaborate on that myself. And
couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And I mean, so other than that, watch it yet again, Cynthia Calvillo going in there, showing people why she's a top prospect, and still even a top prospect, and we're going to get into that later, considering that she just fought not too long ago. And, watching Gegard Mousasi kind of show people why he actually that he actually deserves more credit and more spotlight than people actually give him when he is motivated to fight.
Gegard Mousasi is an MMA legend. This guy is 31 years old. close to, I think, he has close to or more than 50 fights. The man is an MMA legend. He's won titles everywhere. He's won titles in Dream.
Right.
He was won titles in Strike Force. He's fought all over the world, and it's a crime. It's an absolute. It's promotional malpractice that the UFC never used him properly and never promoted him.
Right.
Because that guy
and that fight, even though Chris Weidman, I really like Chris Weidman. I think Chris.
I love the dude.
Yeah, I think Chris Weidman was an amazing champion. I loved his post-fight speeches. All that fun stuff. He, even before he won the belt and everything, he was a technical, accurate, and well put together, MMA fighter before he became an MMA champion. And the weird thing about that is, Gegard Mousasi actually coming in motivated, him saying that, I want to fight people that makes me motivated to fight. Seeing that Gegard Mousasi and letting other people see that Gegard Mousasi come into action like that was actually a highlight of that card for me.
So, and I was looking forward to that fight. It was. I mean, a lot of people, anybody who knew MMA was looking forward to that fight, and it ended on a sour note. But while it lasted, it was an amazing fight. It was.
Yes, it was.
Oh, the other thing I took away from that card was the return of Miles Jury. I've always been a fan of his, and he stayed away from the cage for almost 2 years because of injuries and because of just like the Reebok nonsense. So it was great to see him back, and he put great performance at featherweight versus Mike De La Torre and knocked him out. He KO'd in the first round. So it was great to see him back, and he's in the last card of the year 219. It was nice to see him back winning and stuff. So yeah. 210 was a pretty decent card. There was a lot, plenty of action, plenty of knockouts, plenty of stoppages. So yeah.
So I mean, even the Daniel Cormier versus Anthony Johnson too. Everybody knew what was going to happen there. Other than that weird conundrum of striker turning wrestler and wrestler turning to striker. I mean, everybody knew what was going to happen there. And it hurts to say, that even before Anthony Johnson went into that fight with Daniel Cormier, people were out there saying that, hey, Anthony Johnson has no heart when he gets on the ground. He just loses.
Nope.
I'm just like, you know what? It's already hard enough to be like, hey, Anthony Johnson in his first fight, even though he hit Daniel Cormier so hard, he knocked him nearly halfway across the cage, and he still couldn't knock him out. To come into the second fight with Daniel Cormier and everything, having that in his mind, kind of puts a damper on not only his skills, but his whole entire knockout power,
absolutely.
And it's like, as an MMA fan, you're like, oh yeah, Anthony Johnson, go in there and knock him out. But in order to be in Anthony Johnson's shoes, you have to think, you're like, if I could hit him with a punch and knock him across, halfway across a cage, and it didn't knock him out, what am I really supposed to do against a guy like Daniel Cormier? And then when he realizes he couldn't do anything, I can see how that could just suck all the motivation out of a fighter. So I just had to toss that in there, that a lot of people were out there saying that about Anthony Johnson, but didn't think about the mental aspect of Anthony Johnson coming against somebody like Daniel Cormier. It's a lot of mental gaming going into a fight against somebody like Daniel Cormier, and a lot of fans don't think about stuff like that. But we all knew what was going to happen anyways. We just wanted a different outcome. So that was a highlight of that fight on that card for me.
A lot of fans don't appreciate Daniel Cormier like they should. That's the other problem.
Not at all. Not at all. It's just like they see Daniel Cormier and they're like, oh, Daniel Cormier lost to, John Jones. He's not a real champion. He's not a real fighter. But then they lack and they forget to go over all of the accomplishments that Daniel Cormier himself has as a fighter. And not just even as a fighter, but as a wrestler, as, Olympian, everything else. And realize that, hey, even though it's Anthony Johnson, somebody who would terrify you on the streets if you ever said anything mean to him, like, hey, I hate your shoes, and you're thinking this guy's going to knock your head off across the street and everything. That even somebody like Anthony Johnson, just scary knockout artist, can look at somebody like Daniel Cormier and say, I can't knock this guy out. Or what do I do when he puts me in a submission hold?
Exactly.
Just little small intricacies like that that a lot of MMA fans overlook, but still they're like, hey, I want to see this if Anthony Johnson can actually knock out Daniel Cormier this time. If he can't, it's a wrap. It's going to be DC versus Johnson Part 1. That was the highlight for that card for me.
Yep, I agree.
So, I mean, that is what it is. So, I mean, I guess we'll have to just move on to our next card, which is UFC 211. Miocic versus Dos Santos 2. Pretty pumped up, pretty pumped up double what? Yeah, pretty pumped up card there. And, I mean, what can you really say? Like, that main card right there, that main card was, I'm going to have to say the main card was crazy. I'll just put it like that. Awesome. What do you have to say about it?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it from beginning to end. I mean, you had, like, on the prelims, you had James Vick versus Marco Polo Reyes. James Vick winning by TKO in the first round. You had Chase Sherman versus Rashad Coulter, which was just like a crazy, insane slobber knocker. Chase Sherman stopping Rashad Coulter via KO with an elbow in the second round. You had Jason Knight knocking out Chaz Skelly in the third round with like 30 seconds to go, thereabouts. You had Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier, which was an amazing fight until Eddie Alvarez threw an illegal knee. And even then, that was weird because, they took the referee forever to decide what had happened. But it was a great fight up till then. Dustin Poirier looking really good. You had David Branch defeating Krzysztof Jotko in the main event. I mean, on the main card by split decision, even though I thought the decision should have gone to Krzysztof Jotko. Then you had Frankie Edgar reminding every one of us that he's one of the greatest ever when he stopped Yair Rodriguez. But basically, he put a beating, an unholy beating on Yair Rodriguez. And like Rodriguez is being groomed as the next superstar.
Yeah.
And Frankie was put in there to be his next victim. And, boy, did he not go quietly into that good night. He put a beating on him. Like, you look at Yair Rodriguez's eye.
Terrible.
The fight was horrible. It was something out of a horror movie. It was an amazing performance, just complete domination, like he's done so many times. Put a beating on him. Then you had Damian Maia defeating Jorge Masvidal by split decision.
Yep.
You had Joanna Jędrzejczyk defeating Jessica Andrade via unanimous decision. It was a great performance because a lot of people had Andrade beating Joanna because Andrade is such a
beast.
Well, she's such a beast and so powerful and so strong. But Joanna put in one of the greatest performances of her career. It was just like, because it's true that like she was vulnerable to Andrade's power, but she put in a perfect show of just like technique and movement to keep Andrade at the end of her punches and kicks. And then in the main event, you had Stipe Miocic knocking out Junior Dos Santos in what was really a weird performance because Junior opened up with some really awesome leg kicks and put a beating on Stipe for the first, the opening moments of the bout, and looked really good doing it. And then after the fight, you found out that he'd actually he'd injured. He hit him so hard. His leg kicks were so hard that he'd actually Stipe was injured. But then Junior started going up against the cage, which, like, if you follow Junior's career, whenever he's up against with his back against the cage, bad things happened. Whether it's versus Cain Velasquez or against anybody, he's always better in the center or, making someone back down against the cage. This time he backed down of his own volition, and the end was nigh. Like, it didn't take long for Stipe to knock him out.
Yep.
And it was just a strange one because, he started off so good, and then he just, I guess, he just kind of, he lost himself that fight. And I'm not talking shit here. Like, Stipe is one of my favorite fighters. I love the dude. He's one of the nicest dudes ever. And if any of you want to know more about him, you should check out Joe Rogan's podcast, because he recently appeared on there on the MMA show, and it was you get to know him a lot better if you don't know much about him, and he's just an awesome dude. But that main event was a lot of fun while it lasted, but it was really it was a weird performance by Junior, because he controlled the fight in the first few moments of the fight really well, and then all of a sudden it's almost like he beat himself, because he put himself up against the cage and just almost like he was waiting for the knockout, which came real quick, because those leg kicks that injured Stipe just gave him even more impetus and motivation to end the fight quickly. So yeah, well, those are my main takes from that card, anyways.
All right. Well, I'm as usual, I'm in the same boat as you, and I just overall think that was a really, really good card in terms of, the double championship fights, and just watching Frankie Edgar just basically say, hey, like you said, that like, hey, I'm not going anywhere. You can put me against anybody, and the way that he beat Yair Rodriguez there and everything shows that even though the UFC had been grooming Yair Rodriguez for that whole entire time, shows that he still has really huge gaps there that need to be filled in. And that miscalculation by the UFC in terms of grooming Yair Rodriguez possibly cost him a lot of injuries and a lot of a lot of injuries, and possibly a lot of time away to go train in order for that not to happen again. Because I don't think that Yair Rodriguez could take another couple of those.
No, absolutely not. Like, he had like one of the worst eye injuries I've seen. Like, his eye socket was just completely destroyed, and he probably was concussed as well. And I mean, like, it all depends on the fighter, of course, but maybe he's got like, that's like, I wouldn't be, I'm not trying to be facetious here or be nasty, but like, some people he looked like he'd been in a car crash.
Yeah.
So psychologically, maybe it takes him a long time to get over, or maybe not, but like, we haven't seen him since.
Yeah.
Like, it was a bad beatdown. It was a horrible beatdown.
That was worse than the Josh Koscheck orbital bone injury.
Yeah, because GSP jabbed that thing over 5 rounds. He jabbed him, and by the end it looked bad. But Josh Koscheck by then was already a veteran. Josh Koscheck is as tough as nails. Josh Koscheck, he made a career out of being a jerk. So he doesn't give a shit. But even a tough guy like Josh Koscheck, from that fight onwards, did you notice whenever he get hit, he was always wiping his eye? So obviously he had like some sort of like, muscle memory or something that was bothering him about that eye. He was always favoring that eye. This is a young man. Like, Yair Rodriguez is like 20, 21, 22 at the eldest. And that stuff can really affect you. So, it was a bad call by the UFC. They tried to be smart. They tried to get one over on Frankie Edgar. And I mean, if anything, like, anybody who knows anything about MMA, is you do not use Frankie Edgar to make somebody else look good. You put him in a title fight or nothing, or you put him up against his contemporaries, guys who like other veterans, or you put him in exactly.
Everything, not use him for a stepping stone.
Exactly, and that's what they tried to do, and this is what happened. And no, it was a horrible for Yair Rodriguez. It must have been horrible, because it's like he never got started. He never got to do anything. I think he had one really good head kick. But I mean, if anybody knows anything about Frankie Edgar, is that he's got a ridiculous chin. I mean, he took
Pretty
an
much.
unholy beating by Gray Maynard and came back to win that fight. So, you know, that guy's tough as nails, and he's one of the greatest ever. I mean, think about it. The guy could fight at bantamweight, and he was lightweight champion. What does that tell you? He's one of the all-time greats. He's the, you know, he can easily claim to be the greatest lightweight ever.
Possibly.
Just like just like Benson Henderson can claim that, just like Josh Thompson or Gilbert Melendez. You know, there's been some great lightweights out there, BJ Penn, but I'm pretty partial to. I mean, it tells you all you need to know that the one fighter. I mean, they've protected McGregor from a lot of fighters, but at featherweight, the one fighter they did everything they could to protect him. To protect McLeprechaun from was Frankie Edgar. They shafted Frankie Edgar so bad. And that's the one fighter they never let him face.
That's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because he would have done exactly the same thing to McGregor. Like, if anything worse.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I still feel bad for how bad of a beating Yair Rodriguez got from that, and from how the UFC basically just try to slip him through there. Like, I mean, yes, he accepted the fight. Like, hey, you know, I'm going to fight, you know, Frankie Edgar and everything, and possibly step into title contention. And like, yeah, let's do it. But it's like somebody should have said, hey, Yair Rodriguez, how's your wrestling? And he's going to be like, oh, well, it's pretty good. I have pretty good BJJ, you know, but like, is it good enough to deal with a wrestler like Frankie Edgar? And then somebody realistically should have stepped up and said, no, he does not.
Hey, look what Frankie Edgar did to BJ Penn. BJ Penn is one of the greatest Brazilian jiu-jitsu champions ever. And Frankie Edgar beat him thrice. And the last time they fought, he put a beating on him so bad that it retired BJ. Like,
right.
You know, BJ was never the same after that. So, you know, whatever, you know, like you got to be stupid to do that, to do what they did.
Somebody should have stepped in there and been like, hey, Yair Rodriguez, don't do this. Like, it's just like, you're probably not going to knock out Frankie Edgar. Maybe you might flash KO him, but you're only relying on winning this fight by flash KOing Frankie Edgar. And if you go down to the ground, it's just sit. And somebody should stop that.
Like, even that's unlikely because Frankie Edgar's never been stopped. I mean, anybody who knows anything, never been stopped. I mean, only one time in his career was he hurt, was that Gray Maynard fight.
Exactly. So that's why that was possibly the biggest highlight of that whole fight, because I mean, yes, I love watching Damian Maia fight, especially, you know, Jorge Masvidal. That was going to be a fun fight, but it was going to be a typical Damian Maia fight and everything, where he just tries to drag you down into the Damian Maia pit and strangle you to death. You know, and it was good to see, like, hey, how does Jorge Masvidal stack up against Damian Maia's, you know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And then Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Andrade, it was basically a power versus skill fight. And you know, fun to watch, but yet again, it's like, if you watch MMA long enough, you know that in most cases that skill is going to top out. You know, the skill gap in between strength gap is going to top out over strength most times. So, I mean, it was fun, but we all kind of figured, you know, what was going to happen. Joanna Jędrzejczyk is champion for a reason, and when you see your skills put together, you're kind of like, there's not very many people that stack up to the type of striking skills that she has, even though Jessica Andrade can KO people. She has power. She looks like she swings a wrecking ball of a fist, as powerful as she is. But it is what it is. And yet again, we have, you know, Miocic versus Junior Dos Santos. That was a fun heavyweight brawl. That's what the concept, you know, in theory of what, you know, the main card is supposed to be, a fun heavyweight brawl. And, you know, Junior Dos Santos, a former champion that's taken a lot of punishment in between Cain Velasquez, you know, possibly some of the worst punishment that's been seen in terms of a heavyweight fight. And, and going against somebody like Stipe Miocic, like, hey, what can Junior Dos Santos do against, a newer heavyweight champion? And it was fun while it lasted. Even for the one round that it lasted, it was fun. So that's how I feel about UFC 211. So, I mean, with that wrapped up, I guess, we took a little bit longer because that was, a small little highlight. UFC 212, Aldo versus Holloway in Brazil.
That was an amazing card from beginning to end. It was just awesome. And, it ended in an amazing way in the sense that it was the crowning of
Max
the
Holloway.
new king. Yeah, the new king of featherweight. The new king of featherweight. And it was awesome. It really was. There was a ton of amazing fights from beginning to end. There was some, how can I say, some new fighters introduced. Those, Rafael Assunção versus Marlon Moraes, a great fight.
Yep.
Assunção taking the decision, which I thought was wrong. I would have given it to Marlon Moraes. And then we were introduced, not introduced because he'd already fought, but Paulo Bracinha Costa putting a beating on Oluwale Bangbose or Bamboshe.
One of your favorite fighters.
Yeah, one of my very favorites. One of my very favorites in Bracinha, taking on one of my very, very favorite in Oluwale Bangbose. Sarcasm. Then you had a great performance by Yancy Medeiros, knocking out Eric Silva. You had Claudio Gadelha not submitting Karolina Kowalkiewicz, which was really impressive. Rear naked choke in the first round, and then of course an all-time great performance, the interim champ Max Holloway defeating the champion, the greatest featherweight ever, Jose Aldo, by TKO in the third round. But it was an amazing performance because in the first two rounds, Aldo looked better than ever. Seemed better than ever. Put a beating on Max Holloway. Max Holloway, who's just one of the toughest dudes I've ever seen, just took it and just started timing Jose, dropped him in the third round, and just put an unholy beating on him via ground and pound until the referee stopped Jose. But it was a great performance and the beginning of Max Holloway's reign of terror.
The blessed era.
Yeah. I mean, there's only one person I can see beating Max Holloway, honestly, and that's Frankie Edgar.
Yep.
Apart from Frankie Edgar, I just do not see anybody beating him. I know people are really high on that kid, guy who just submitted Cub Swanson.
Oh, T-City? Brian Ortega?
Yeah, T-City, who I'm a huge fan of. I love that kid, but no, I do not see that Brian Ortega beating Max Holloway. This, if I'm pretty sure that Max Holloway's next title defense is going to be against Frankie Edgar. And if he manages to get back Frankie Edgar, he could reign over that featherweight division for I don't know how long, unless they find no, it's going to take someone truly special to defeat
Max Holloway.
Max Holloway, man. Like that kid, that dude is something else. Like he's got cardio for days. He's got mental toughness, like unbelievable. He ain't even cocky. He's just like he's just a fighter. To me, he's the anti-McGregor. He's a fighter, yeah. Like a Diaz brother, Right. Just that he adapts better than Diaz brothers. And this is not a slight on the Diaz brothers, because anybody who listens to this podcast knows I'm their biggest fan. is just the Diaz brothers are natural born brawlers, and by brawl I mean they're fighters, and they could win some. There's plenty of decisions they've lost that they could have probably won or done better at. It's just they just like to stand and fight, like the pugilist of old. But Max Holloway is just he loves to fight, he loves to brawl,
everywhere.
but at the same time he loves to win, and he's so focused that he won't let anything get in his way. So he will adapt if he has to. And I mean, he's just as complete an MMA fighter as there is. Whether it's technique, whether it's strength, whether it's cardio, whatever you want to look at, the guy does not have a weakness. I mean, the closest thing I can say to a weakness he has is he can be susceptible to leg kicks, just like the Diaz brothers. But I mean, take him down is a very bad idea because, he's got excellent jiu-jitsu. He's a good grappler. Like, taking him down, I don't think is the hardest thing, but he's got those long limbs and he'll just wrap him around you and reverse position or just choke you out. And, he can fight all day. Like, literally, he could go 10 rounds easily. So, yeah, that guy's going to be champion if he beats Frankie Edgar.
All right. Fair enough.
He could be champion for the next 10 years as far as I'm concerned because he's really young. He's only 25 or 26. So, he could easily be featherweight champion for the next 10 years.
Right. And then even if he loses, still come back and get the belt.
Exactly. Because this guy adapts. He makes every time you see him, he gets better as well. He adds something to his game. He's just so motivated. This guy, he's like, if you ever want to teach some kid or someone about MMA and like how, someone to look up to, someone to look at and say, okay, model my game or my, tactics on, it's Max Holloway. You could do a lot worse than model yourself on Max Holloway or teach your kid to be more like him, because this kid has everything and he's never satisfied with what he has or what he's accomplished. He's always looking to get better. So that guy's an awesome martial artist.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, and yet again, I'm going to have to, pretty much agree with you here. I mean, like, I really, really, really like this card.
Yeah,
I really like this card. I mean, just watching Vitor, Belfort versus Nate Marquardt and everything. Like I said, it's fights like that are always going to hit my nostalgia button.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to go out there and say it. And I mean, seeing Marlon Moraes and everything kind of got me pumped too, because I look at the guy, I look at what he does, or what he does, like, as far as a fighter and as what he's done as a champion. And I'm just like, this guy is exciting. I like this. I like this. And putting him in there with a Sun Cow it wasn't the best decision, but I could understand the whole reasoning of putting him in there with, a Sun Cow for his first fight. And I think this guy is title contender before the end of the year, like easily. And that's why I was excited when they brought him over. And I was just like, I don't care what goes on here. And even that split, I still think that Moraes could have taken that fight.
Me too.
On his first fight in UFC.
I thought it was a mistake, and I have nothing against Sansao. It's just I thought Moraes won that fight, but whatever. It was a close fight. When it's close, you never know. So
right.
Sansao got the decision, big deal. But I mean, ever since then, Moraes has been amazing.
Yeah, just like I said, watching him from that card to now and everything, amazing. And I can't wait to see more of him. This year, and I'm saying that before the year is over, he's in title contention.
He was, definitely, and it makes me happy because I mean, they got mocked, and rightly so, because World Series of Fighting as a promotion were a joke, but that doesn't mean they didn't have world-class fighters. They had some amazing talent on that roster. They had Lance Palmer. They had some truly exceptional fighters. And Marlon Moraes was probably the best fighter they had on their roster. Long-time champion.
Yes.
Yeah, and there you go.
So
It was great to see him, and I mean, Assunção been a title contender for the last 5 years, always close title contention, and he's bona fide elite fighter. Like if you beat this guy, basically anyone who beats Assunção should be given a title shot. That's how good Assunção is. He's a grizzled veteran, and he's an amazing fighter. He's a tough guy. Like he's an excellent wrestler, high level grappler, heavy hands, lots of knockout power. So, whichever way you look at it,
he's a complete elite fighter. All
yeah. Can give anybody trouble. Anybody. I don't care who, he's like the Jacare of the bantamweight division.
Yep. But yeah, that was definitely one of the highlights. I mean, Fiorentina just, getting to see how he fights and, what he does as a fighter and everything was a highlight. And the guy, I don't know what to say. Like the guy, he looks like a light heavyweight. He fights like a light heavyweight.
Yeah, he does. He moves like one too.
Yeah, he does. It's just crazy seeing him down there at middleweight. And I'm just like, this guy is he's a rare type of fighter in his weight division that he's at, and he's going to go far in terms of either promotion or in terms of rankings.
They've got a superstar on their hands. Zuffa have a superstar on their hands. It's all about whether they can recognize it or not. I don't know if they do. I hope they do, but yeah.
But guy, then it's like he looks he looks like a superstar, but he just still needs to test himself against someone up there in the like top 5-ish area, or anybody that's been a former title contender to give him that real superstar push.
I'd love to see him versus David Branch, another top class fighter. Versus Chris Weidman might be too much of a jump because he is very young, but like against the top 10 talent, top 10 middleweight, and he could do work against
somebody who's actually a middleweight, not Johnny Hendricks. No offense, Johnny Hendricks, if you're listening, or
exactly. Johnny Hendricks is
no offense, but
Johnny Hendricks should have fought at lightweight. Yeah. Let's be honest, he could have fought at lightweight if he didn't.
Let's just let it be what it is.
Yeah,
on that one.
But what would have been a fun fight? Him versus Uriah Hall. Okay, that's not a top 10 talent. Actually, isn't Uriah Hall still in the top 10? I don't even know.
You know what? I mean, I thought he broke into the top 10 at one point in time.
Oh, definitely, because he beat Uriah Hall. Remember, he upset Uriah Hall in 2015. Summer 2015. So he was definitely in the top 10 back then because he defeated Gegard Mousasi. Yeah. And Mousasi at the time was number 5 or number 6. So he was definitely in the top 10. Then Robert Whittaker, by the way, like you give Borachinia a couple more fights, him versus Robert Whittaker would be crazy.
Yes, it would.
Or you could match him up against what's his name? The Hawaiian middleweight. The guy I really like. He's often unlucky because he fought Tim Boetsch. That's another great fight. Tim Boetsch versus Borachinia. That's two heavy hitting monsters.
Two fighters that are going to come straight forward at each other.
Exactly, and just like beat the crap out of each other. That would be a great fight. And if Borachinia can get past Boetsch, he's a contender because anybody who gets past Boetsch, Borachinia versus Boetsch, Borachinia versus what's his name? Jesus, I'm having trouble tonight. I said Hall.
Okay,
but then Borachinia versus Branch, who's a grizzled veteran.
Yeah,
a double World Series, double champion. There's a lot of really good, interesting exciting fights for Borrachinha at middleweight. You know,
Pretty much.
Even Borrachinha versus Marvin Vettori.
Okay, yeah.
That's another good fight. You know, there's plenty of
fights out there for
Borrachinha versus Derek Brunson. That's what I was looking for.
Okay. Yeah.
How about that?
I like that. I think that would be a definite good test for him and a really exciting fight, all in the same. So, but yeah, guys.
Yoel Romero is a bit too early. Like, you know, Yoel Romero should be like the next title challenger. Whatever happens between Luke Rockhold and Robert Whittaker. And, you know, Yoel got shafted. But, you know, down the line, that would be another great fight.
Yep. So, I mean, that was definitely another highlight of UFC, you know, 212. And then, you know, Claudia Gadelha versus, you know, Carolina Kowalkiewicz. That was a fun fight. So I like that.
Yeah.
I figured that was going to be a fun fight. But Max Holloway, interim champion to champion. I've been a big fan of Max Holloway for the longest and always said, even in his defeat at the hands of Conor McGregor, this is what made me possibly his biggest fan. He said that it's like, hey, before that fight, I'd always just practice in my garage with anybody who came to train with me in my garage. And I said, how is a guy still fighting at this level if he's still training in his garage with anybody who shows up to fight with him in his garage?
Yeah.
And I said, so what will happen if he actually went and got some real training? Like if he actually went to a gym with some good instructors, you know, good practitioners, all that stuff, and got some in real good training. And I said, if that loss made him see that fighting random people in his garage wasn't going to get him to that highest level that he needed to be, but still put up that type of a fight against Conor McGregor at that point in time, I'm like, if he goes to a gym at any point in time, this guy will be champion. And in that fight with all the way up to that fight with anybody, all the way up to the fight with Jose Aldo, I said Max Holloway can be champion, and he ended up becoming champion. And that is what, just watching it just blew me away.
Yeah.
It was just something that I said Max Holloway could be champion to becoming champion, and it was just seeing that whole action basically actually happening. And he possibly might be champion for a long time, except like you said, if he comes into contention with Frankie Edgar. Any MMA fighter, you know, any MMA fighter or fan knows, if you slip up against Frankie Edgar, even for a second or half a second, Frankie Edgar is going to put you in some of the worst positions that you've possibly ever been in your life.
Yep. I mean, look at his long list of victims. I mean,
right.
The only person Frankie Edgar could never get past was Jose Aldo, who happens to be, well, I don't know, the greatest featherweight ever in history.
Right.
But like Max Holloway is the future, obviously. And I'm not being disrespectful to Aldo. I have nothing but respect to me. He's the greatest Brazilian champion, UFC Brazilian champion ever in history. Like, I have nothing but respect for the dude. But after what we just saw this year, and we'll get back to, you know, to it a little later in the show, like Max Holloway proved that he's got next. He's the new breed. He's, you know, the next champion. He's better. Right. He has the beating of Aldo like no one else. Like Conor McGregor, it's one thing to knock someone out in 13 seconds. It's another thing to completely outclass, to take a guy's best shots, best leg kicks, and just walk through it and beat the guy and beat the man. So, and that's what he did. He outclassed him. And I've never seen anyone do that to Aldo. Never, ever. And wow, just wow. It's just amazing performance.
That was definitely the highlight, and it just something that just had to be seen, especially coming from Max Holloway. Top of the highlight card, you know, top of the highlight fight for that card. So that's how I felt about UFC 212.
Could I just add one more thing? I don't know if you saw recently, after Max Holloway's last performance, which we'll get back to again later, McGregor, who basically made headlines for doing absolutely nothing this year in MMA,
Again,
tried to get some of that shine and like posted a social media message kind of poking fun of Max Holloway. And Max Holloway's response was just brilliant. It was, both classy and brilliant. He just posted a poster of McGregor in 2015 and saying, like, retired fighters love the past. It was just a perfect response. And then the second half of his post of his answer was all his achievements. And basically Max Holloway has pretty much every record in the featherweight books now. He's got the record number of finishes, consecutive finishes. He's got the record number of, whatever you look at, Max Holloway probably has every record there is. And he's making a great case for himself as the greatest featherweight ever. And as far as I'm concerned, if he ever beats Frankie Edgar, he is the greatest featherweight ever. I got nothing but love and respect for Aldo, but after what he's done versus Aldo, I don't think if he managed to beat Frankie Edgar, you cannot. I will crown, personally, he is the greatest featherweight ever in my book.
Right. That's just really hard to disagree with that. Period.
Ton of great fights, though. Ton of great title defenses for him. There's a lot of talent at featherweight. You've got Cub Swanson if you want. You've got Brian Ortega coming up. You've got Josh Emmett. You've got, there's a lot of awesome fighters at featherweight. So good times are up ahead for if you're a fan of the featherweight.
Especially the blessed era.
Yeah, the blessed era. Blessed are we, man, because this guy's not going to go off and try and
go box.
Go and box or avoid people. He's not going to avoid anybody. He's just going to carry on. So yeah, may it continue for years to come. Although, I would have no problem watching Max Holloway take his featherweight belt and take on the lightweight champion, whoever he is, because he could do work at lightweight too.
Oh yeah, he definitely.
It's just how good he is.
He's still young and everything. He still has weight to gain in terms of getting up there with age and his body type. He definitely can move to lightweight and also just wreck shop up there.
Absolutely, man. He's got the perfect MMA body. Not an inch of fat. Cardio for days. Technique for days. Just the guy's a monster, man. And
right. And then room to move up.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely room to move up. He's a freakishly tall featherweight. He's 5'11", which is huge for featherweight.
Yep.
The average height for featherweight is 5'6", I believe. So yeah, he's a very, very big featherweight. So he could easily do work at lightweight. And I'd love nothing more than to see him versus McGregor in a rematch, because already I thought McGregor didn't really deserve the decision in the first place. He got it, so whatever, I have to deal with it. But I could see him you don't knock out Max Holloway. So I could see 100 different ways he beats McGregor. Yeah, McGregor, if he doesn't knock you out, he's got a disadvantage, and McGregor's just cardio is just a joke, and Max Holloway can fight all night, literally all night. The guy's built if he'd been older and fought in the Pride era, he would have been a great Pride fighter, because Pride loved their tournaments, and he's built for tournaments because he's got cardio to last all night. So he would have been a nightmare for anybody.
Yeah. Vicious and cardio. Fighter stream right there.
Exactly.
So, All right, all right. So we're gonna get back to the Blessed Era soon enough, everybody. But now we're going to step into UFC. I mean, a fighter that we just discussed, Yoel Romero and Robert Whitaker on that one. How do you feel, Whitaker?
Oh man, that was a great card. It was a great card in the sense that it was just full of great fights. The main event was special. It was special in two ways. It was bittersweet in the sense that it should have never happened. It should have only happened as a genuine title fight. Like both those guys got shafted in that fight because they should have been fighting for the real title. Because Michael the Cup Bisping was running away as usual, looking for a big money fight with GSP that he didn't deserve. But the main event was just, I mean, I called it a Frank Frazetta painting come to life. Because you look at those two savages who fought in that main event, they were absolute monsters, and they put on a great performance. And Robert Whitaker managed to eke out a decision, a very tight, contested decision, but he did. And it's just a shame these two guys fought for the interim middleweight title. It should have been for if they'd fought, they deserved to fight for the real belt because they both earned their shots, both of them. Romero first because he'd gone through, look at the people he'd gone through to win. He'd beaten Jacare, the guy nobody wants to fight. He'd beaten Chris Weidman, which earned him his title shot. But, I mean, he was unbeaten in 8 fights in the UFC. He did everything many times over to earn that title shot, and he got shafted. But I enjoyed every minute of that fight. It was an awesome fight. And well, that card is notorious because it was, historically the big July summer blockbuster fights are reserved for superstars and title fights. But this year, because of whatever coincidences or fighters not wanting to bail the UFC out, we were left with Yoel Romero versus Whitaker, which is nothing to sniff at because, like I said, it was a great fight. You also had the other notable fights that stuck out to me was Anthony Pettis versus Jim Miller. Anthony Pettis kind of for that night brought out the best, his best in years. That was his best performance in years, since he'd been lightweight champion. Put a beating on Jim Miller, won a unanimous decision. Yet Alexei Olenek, 43-year-old, I believe, choking out Travis Brown. You had Thiago Santos defeating Gerald Meerschaft via TKO in the second round. That was, Thiago Santos Mareta. He's always
always a fighter that's going to turn any fight into a nightmare.
Oh yeah. That guy's amazing, man. His head kicks are brutal. His leg kicks are brutal. He's there you go. Borachinia versus Mareta. That's another great fight.
It is
guaranteed violence, guaranteed action.
Sheesh.
Yeah, lots of great fights. But yeah, those are the fights that stuck out to me.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to have to say I'm going far down this card for this one. Cody Stamann.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Cody Stamann reminds me. Matter of fact, we talked about this and everything. He reminds me of the new Sean Shirk. And just watching him fight and everything reminds me of his striking is improved, his wrestling is amazing, and yet again, this is further down the line, but watching him fight from that point on, I just kind of had that feeling. I was like, I'm watching Sean Shirk return in this fight, and it was really amazing to watch, especially what he did later on in the UFC lineup. I'm just not going to say it now. So yeah, that was nice to watch, and I had an eye on him for a while. So seeing him in that fight, even though he got a decision, that was a highlight for me. And
great performance.
Yes. And as usual, watching Thiago Marietta Santos, every time he fights, it's going to be action, whether it's from him or from both fighters in that cage at that point in time. Thiago Santos always brings a fight. So that was definitely a fun one. And, Anthony Pettis, it was a small highlight because everybody wishes that the Showtime kick Anthony Pettis, champion, will come back and wow people with amazing fight IQ and all types of flashy knockout kicks and, different types of things like that, kind of something that possibly is going to overshadow his whole entire career in a negative form. That everybody's going to expect that Showtime kick Anthony Pettis to come out and be able to adapt and, turn every advantage in the cage into an opportunity for him to win. But then when he just comes and fights and, it's just like, hey, I'm going to fight with the skills that I have, everybody's disappointed anyways, even with a win. But still, just seeing Anthony Pettis go in there and fight was a pretty good highlight, just to watch him fight. Alistair Overeem versus Fabricio Werdum. That was supposed to be like somewhat of a technical heavyweight brawl between Fabricio Werdum, who has more than likely wanted to be a well-known knockout artist type striker, versus who is a knockout artist type striker. And I mean, that fight was going to go the way that it did if Werdum couldn't basically take Alistair Overeem down and control him. So Alistair Overeem, yeah, he won that fight, but it was still fun to watch, figuring that each fighter has their own personal strength and seeing if they would use it. So it was almost like watching a chess match that could have turned into a brawl at any second. So that was fun.
It was a special fight because, I mean, like, I'm not a fan of Werdum. I'm not fond of Werdum. I don't like him, but that doesn't mean I don't respect him as a fighter. Like, that guy's a high level fighter. But he's Werdum is known for his grappling, for his jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's one of the greatest Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners in the octagon. Alistair Overeem is the exact opposite, but they're both very complete in the sense that Alistair Overeem is known for his amazing Muay Thai or kickboxing skills. He's a legendary kickboxer, but he has amazing grappling. He's got excellent grappling. He's submitted people before. And then Werdum is known for his grappling, yet has excellent striking.
Yep.
So yeah, it was interesting. But I mean, the fight was interesting. It was very there was, it was a strange kind of fight, but it was a very interesting fight. Like, if you love MMA, you'll enjoy it. But like, I had no problem with Alistair Overeem taking the decision because, he did get dropped in the first round, I believe. Like, Werdum caught him, but then Werdum just kind of went into his own shell, tried to grapple with him, and Alistair Overeem did enough on the ground to eke out a decision, as far as I'm concerned, because he completely shut down Werdum and landed more after that, even though he got dropped in the first round. So it was that's what I said.
It was like a heavyweight chess match.
Yes, it was.
That had a potential to turn into a heavyweight brawl.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. And I believed Alistair earned his win, his split decision win, because he was more active on the ground. He found a way to shut down Werdum, to stop any submission attempts, and managed to get some good strikes off the ground and on the feet. It was more technical, point fighting, but he managed to do it. So, fair play to him. That's the way I saw it anyways.
Right. Yeah, I was just like, I'm glad. It was definitely a draw, in terms of like, MMA fan interest. And I guess the last fight is, Whitaker versus Romero. Yes, it was not a fight that was supposed to happen. That fight should have never happened. Plain and simple. Considering the
It should happen
circumstances.
as a title fight.
Yeah, considering the circumstances and who was champion at that time and what was going on, somebody should have said, like, look, like, Romero is on a winning streak. This guy is like, we're not giving him we're not doing him any favors here, putting him in a fight with somebody like Robert Whitaker. And as much as he's done and as many wins as he currently has, just kind of like tossing him in there just to throw a fight on for the interim championship was still a loss for the UFC.
Yes, it was.
In terms of how fighters see what they're worth, how the UFC plays them against each other for, other situations that might be in their favor, monetarily. And it was just a loss for them, especially losing somebody that's marketable like Yoel Romero, but getting somebody who's a fighter and heavily marketable like Robert Whitaker. And they still lost in terms of the consequences that they have to deal with from the fans and the fighters in that fight. I loved watching it. I thought it was a great fight. That kind of soured that card for me, considering just the UFC just blatantly downplaying and disrespecting their fighters like that.
Absolutely. It's not a good look. It makes the UFC look bad. I mean, that's a recurring scenario or topic from 2017. They shafted a whole lot of top fighters just to to make, like, whatever you want to call them, money fights, bullshit fights, this nonsense. And it was a shame. I mean, I loved it. It was great for any hardcore fan to watch these two go at it. But like, these two should have been fighting for the ultimate, for the
belt,
for the title, for the belt, instead of some bullshit interim belt. Like that's one of the, it's a low point in the sense. It was a high point in the sense of the performance from both these men. But
yeah,
and then there's arguments to say that Yoel should have gotten the decision. But whichever way you want to look at it, these two, the only time these two should have faced each other would have been for the outright belt, and it's a shame they didn't. But what a great fight! What a great performance by Yoel! What an amazing performance by Robert Whitaker!
Yep,
it was a great fight.
So, all right. So, I mean, that's just how it goes sometimes. But let's step on to the next card. UFC 214.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just wow.
Yeah. Here, I'll let you take that one first.
Just, I mean, to me, like, I remember we did a podcast the night of that fight, and like, to me, it was just like it had legend written all over it. To me, it was like a Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier kind of feel to it. John Jones versus Daniel Cormier Part 2. Two of the greatest light heavyweights ever going at it after everything that had happened, after, John Jones losing his belt and, being away for different reasons. First of all, with that car accident he had, running into a pregnant woman's car, then testing positive on the night before, on the eve of UFC 200, just redemption, and then that red hot rivalry he had with Cormier. It was just an amazing, so many topics, so many storylines, and the result was probably the greatest performance, or one of the greatest performances of John Jones's career. It was just an amazing card. 3 title fights: Cyborg versus Evinger, Tanya Evinger. You had one of the worst title fights ever in Tyron Woodley versus Damian Maia. The whole card was full of quality, and the main event performance was one for the ages, man. That head kick. And then, the ground and pound John Jones put on DC. I mean, DC had never lost except for once to John Jones. DC, barely lost a round. I think he lost, aside from that John Jones fight, the two John Jones fights, which he lost, obviously. I think he hadn't lost a round except to Gustafsson.
Yep.
He probably lost 2 rounds to Gustafsson. I mean, Daniel Cormier is one of the greatest mixed martial artists ever, and John Jones knocked him out. So that's that's an amazing achievement. Anybody who beats Cormier is an amazing fighter, obviously, because the only guy to ever beat him was John Jones.
Yep.
But to actually stop him was just madness. It was a great card. It had, one of my favorite events of the year. Go ahead.
Oh, fair enough. To tell you the truth, Brian Ortega on that card. I mean, a lot of people heard a lot of stuff about Brian Ortega. Just hearing about him, kind of jump that hype up to like, hey, I want to see what this guy can do. And just watching him was definitely a plus for that card. Even leading into the main event, it was just a plus. And, just still being, pumped up for any fight that Brian Ortega is going to be in past that fight. It's definitely a plus of watching that card. And then Aljamain Sterling versus Barao. Just, thinking of Barao making that comeback and, just fighting anywhere is just like, hey, Barao could come back and be back in his championship form, go back and get another title, all that type of stuff. But then seeing the potential of Aljamain Sterling, considering the camp that he's comes from, was a definite highlight. And even the fight, even Aljamain Sterling winning that fight was still satisfying enough to make that fight worth it. Ricardo Lamas versus Jason Knight, or Jason Hick Diaz Knight. Just those two, just anticipating the brawl between those two was good enough, even though knowing that Jason Knight at that point in time, even with the hype, was stepping a little past his league and taking on somebody like Ricardo Lamas. So,
absolutely. Yeah, that was a great performance by Lamas, the bully Lamas, a guy that's been shafted by the UFC so many times, underappreciated, underrated, but that guy's like truly world class, and he proved it in that fight.
Right.
What a knockout.
It definitely was a good fight, to watch on that card. And then stepping even into the main card, getting Volkan, Osmir there, and Jimmy Manuel watch, like, come on, these guys are going to throw down, and it's just somebody's going to go down really fast. So that was a plus, and getting to see what Volkan could do, considering Jimmy Manuel has not very high on him as some people are. Hint, hint.
Yeah, same here.
Right, just
fun fighter, spectacular fighter, but limited. Like, not complete and has holes. Like, every time he's fought a truly world-class fighter, he's come up short, and really short. Like, by short, I mean, like, basically short of his senses, because he gets himself knocked out. But
pretty much.
I remember the night we called it on the night of the fight during the prelims, and I think we all chose Volkan Ozdemir.
Yeah,
because basically he's he's a really fun fighter to watch, but Manawa is a poor man's Anthony Johnson.
No, and it sucks to say that, but it just is what it is.
Yeah,
and that's how he took it. And so just saying like, hey, these guys, they're not going to try to wrestle each other. They're not going to try to do anything. This is just going to be a straight out, we're going to punch each other in the face until one of us goes down.
Yeah. And boy, did Manawa go down, because Ozdemir separated him from his senses, man. Like, Ozdemir has just that freakish power.
Oh, yes. That was definitely a fun fight, to start off the main card. Then Robbie Lawler, Donald Cerrone,
Yeah, great
Who,
fight.
who wasn't going to be pumped up for that fight?
Exactly. It was a great
There's
fight.
just there's just no way. Robbie Lawler, the people's champ that everybody wants to be champion all the time, even when he loses. Just and then Donald Cerrone, the other people's champ that people love him to death. People love watching him fight 200 times a year. It was just a great fight to just put on this card as well. Then the triple championship fights. Really, I don't even know if I should separate all of them because all of them were anticipated kind of highlight fights, except for the fight that I'm going to say right now. Willie versus Maya. I am a diehard Woodley fan in terms of who he is as a person and what he's done as a fighter. But sometimes a fighter still has to go out there and fight. I mean, yes, there's point fighting. Yes, there's, people who just specifically go out there and do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and everything. But when you don't engage as a fighter, especially when, you tell people that, hey, I'm not being promoted, or, hey, people don't think I'm exciting. Sometimes as a fighter or as a champion, you have to come forward yourself to prove to people that you're exciting and that you should be highlighted in the way that you want. If as a champion or as a fighter, you just say, hey, I just want to fight the way that I want to fight, then fine. Let it be what it is. But if you say, hey, I want to be sponsored, I want to be highlighted, I want to be, well accepted by the MMA community. If a huge portion of the MMA community wants fighters that engage in fights, that, go out there to finish and to do all of that, then give them what they want. Don't go out there and fight just to run down the clock or just to get enough points to win. And that's a hard thing for me to say, considering how much I personally like Tyron Woodley. Very, very tough thing to say. But I just had to go out there and say it, and it just is what it is. The other two title fights, Cyborg versus Evinger, I mean, yes, let's be honest. Let's just go ahead and say it. Everybody wants to see Chris Cyborg knock people silly. Everybody wants to see Chris Cyborg going there and maul anybody that's put in front of her. And she does not have a division put around her, so everybody coming into the cage with Chris Cyborg is basically a slaughter. And that's what everybody wants to see so far. And that's exactly what that fight was for Tony Evinger. She was basically a lamb being led to the slaughter. And I'm pretty sure at some point in time she knew that. And us as MMA fans still love that fight. So the next fight, John Jones versus Daniel Cormier, part 2. Possibly as technical and as anticipated as a fight can possibly get in all shapes and forms.
You can't get more. It was the greatest rematch in UFC history. Let's be honest. That's what it was. It was.
You have possibly one of the greatest MMA fighters in John Jones taking on Daniel Cormier, possibly another one of the greatest MMA fighters, in just period, in between heavyweight and light heavyweight.
Yeah. Like, the night of the fight, we discussed it, and I stated that I believe that Cormier has a legitimate claim if he ever wants to claim being the greatest heavyweight ever, because you look at his run at heavyweight, he never lost a round as a heavyweight, and he fought some of the best. So yeah, it's it's just underappreciated. Yes. People don't appreciate him as a champion or as a fighter, but that guy is as good as anybody.
Exactly. And then that fight was at the high point of technical elite MMA fighting as it could possibly get. And watching John Jones knock out Daniel Cormier, this is not a knock against Daniel Cormier. I would never be like, hey, I just want somebody to go punch Daniel Cormier in the face. Because no,
it's
not at all. But watching that as an MMA fan, it's kind of like, how do you ever get to see two of the most technical MMA fighters in terms of overall skills get in a cage and fight the way that they did.
Exactly.
So
stunning, man.
Stunning, completely stunning. Still stunned when I think about it. Possibly right there, I'm going to put that as possibly the highlight fight of the whole entire year for 2017.
As far as like legitimacy, as far as like both their careers, as what they've accomplished, everything. Because I mean, like the biggest event, we'll talk about it later or on another day, because I think we're nearing the end of our time here. But UFC 217 was huge, but the two fighters, as far as legacy and achievements, weren't equal at all. These two were two fighters at the top of their game, at the top of their division, two of the greatest ever in light heavyweight history. Well, in Daniel Cormier's case, one of the greatest light heavyweights ever and one of the greatest heavyweights ever, taking on, well, there is no question, the greatest light heavyweight ever. So it was just like, it was neck and neck. It's, you know, this is, well, basically it's MMA's answer to Cassius Clay versus Joe Frazier. It really is.
Pretty much.
It really was, and it delivered, because
I mean, there's possibly no other MMA fight that somebody could just come up with in this very instant where two people with the type of credentials, skills, and achievements that Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier have that actually fought in the same ring can top as a highlight fight in terms of epicness in MMA in its current state. I mean, even Cruz stepping into, you know, a ring or into a cage to fight, even TJ Dillashaw, those two have some of the most worthy MMA credentials that you could possibly give to somebody, and even that fight did not stack up to the complete epicness of Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier, 1 or 2.
Not even close. Not even close. No, this is just, it had legend written all over it. It had legacy written all over it. It had, you know, bad intentions written all over it, such as the rivalry. These two do not like each other. They obviously respect each other, which is cool, because, you know, how can you not respect, you know, credentials like that these two bring to the table? But it was, you know, it was just, it had legend written all over it, and boy, did it deliver. It was just amazing, especially this year. It was a special fight, because this year has been, you know, a low point in many ways for the UFC. I mean, you had the UFC president basically spending 90% of his time promoting a boxing match that should have never happened. So this was really special. It was the first card, the first pay-per-view after the McGregor nonsense, and it was special.
Definitely so, and that, like I said, that's still the cap of the year 2017 in terms of being an MMA fan. Like, period. It just, I don't know what to say.
High level, man. High level. It had everything. It had everything. It had, you know, like I said, 3 title fights. It had a great main event. It had a great co-main. It had a great women's fight. One of the, you know, like Cyborg finally getting her shot at the featherweight title that is hers and only hers, you know, that she should have fought for in the first place. It just, you know, it was just a great card. One of the greatest UFC cards I've ever seen, and one of Jon Jones's greatest performances ever. I mean, anytime you're going to take on, beat, and then stop Daniel Cormier, you're automatically a legend.
Just complete craziness there, and yeah, that definitely is it. So, I mean, so far that, you know, is our take on UFC 208 to 214, and we still have a bunch more cards and a whole bunch of other MMA topics and everything to still go into review of 2017, and we will most likely and most definitely, we're going to most definitely do it. But our time is coming to an end, and yet again, we're going to have to leave you MMA fans. So I will have to say, hey, thank you for joining us. And, as usual, we appreciate it. Hit the like button, leave us comments on what you think, give us your thoughts on this episode or anything that you think about this episode. And, thank you. You all have a happy new year, and join us again for the next episode. Cyrus?
Feel free to like and subscribe. We always appreciate it. Check out MMAHypeWatch.com or check out our site MMA Hype Watch on Google Plus. Check out FightBookMMA.com, both the site or on Google Plus. They're also on Facebook. Lots of great articles, lots of great fighter interviews. We're going to strive to get better and better over here at Soul of a Fighter. We're going to just do our best to start interviewing fighters this year. That's one of our New Year's resolutions. We're going to try and bring some new things to this podcast. We're going to try and get bigger and better. And as always, we're always going to, our priority is always talking about MMA, our love of MMA, but most importantly, like what makes MMA special is its fighters. And we're always going to have the fighters' backs. We're always going to tell their stories, and whatever we discuss, it's always going to be through the eyes of the fighters. So, you guys all have a happy new year. And just one more thing, check out Captain Israel on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook. My good friend Sasha Kaplan has a great new podcast, Captain's Corner, here on YouTube. You guys should check that out. It's brilliant. And thanks to any and all who listened tonight. It was a lot of fun, and stay tuned for part 2. It's coming real soon. Hope you guys had as much fun as we had recording this.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And that's it for Soul of the Fighter. Thank you all, and we're out.
Good night.